Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we're going to do this montage of my Key West memories. And I heard a YouTuber called Sketches and Scrubs say about travel sketching as you're looking at things with rose-tinted glasses. And I think that's kind of the case because when I came home and I looked at my photos that I took on vacation, I was thinking, why did I take a picture of this? Why did I think this was going to be a good painting? But I thought this scooter would be really cute, and I'm naming it the Struggle Scooter because I struggled through this entire painting. If you'd like a real-time version of this commentary, live commentary, and live instruction, you can find it up now in Critique Club. Now I'm starting off by sketching this with a graphite pencil. It's the ocean blue color, I think, because I just thought that would kind of go with the Caribbean vibes. And I'm sketching it directly on my watercolor paper. So first mistake here, should have sketched it on scrap paper and then transferred it when I was happy with it. Because as I was working here, I realized, ooh, I kind of made this smaller than I thought. If I had sketched it on scrap paper, I could have redrawn it. I could have scanned my drawing in and blown it up. I would have had more options. But I'm like, I'm just going with it. I also wanted to test out this paper. This is the level 3 100% cotton made in Italy Artist Loft professional paper from Michaels. And generally, I wouldn't really look twice at the Artist Loft brand, but this was made in Italy and 100% cotton and on clearance for 50% off. So I said, oh yeah, I like some cheap 100% cotton European made paper. I sure do. So I had picked that up when I was on my recent trip to the stamp show in West Springfield. And I thought, I'm going to give it a shot because if it's great paper, I want to tell you guys about it so you can grab some too while it's cheap. So the regular price on this pad was like $40. I wouldn't take a gamble at $40, but for 20, I sure will. And I need to do another just kind of straight watercolor on it to determine its quality. I couldn't really tell from this, but I was able to see granulation on the surface. It doesn't feel like it's a terribly heavily sized paper, but neither does Fabriano Artistico. And I have a hunch that maybe Fabriano was making this paper because they make paper for other brands. Now I had the little parking lines off. I didn't have the perspective quite right, so I'm just scrubbing that out, and I was able to scrub it out, so that's good, which I really should be able to because I was using granulating colors, and sedimentary colors sit on the top of the paper and they lift easily, so that should scrub out no problem. I'm adding a little bit of a shadow here. There's not really strong light in this because the whole road is in shadow at this point, but I wanted to give it a little bit of depth, and so that's what I'm doing there. Then I thought, I really ought to have all of this tar a little bit darker than the surrounding tar because of the shadow. Just kind of fussing around here with the big brush. It's one of my brushes through Craft Mo. They did restock on those. I think they still have some in stock if you're looking for them. I'll link them down below if you're interested. I decided to go in with some Inktense blocks. Just kind of throwing a bunch of stuff at this paper. I'm just seeing how it's going to respond. And I thought it'd be cuter to have this scooter to be kind of like a teal or aqua color versus the cream that it is. So I was going with that too because I wanted those tropical, beautiful pastel-y colors in this piece because I'm painting a memory, right? And sometimes you want to get that vibe of being there because everything was so pretty and warm and tropical and pastel, and the colors and the vibe was just, I don't know. I'm trying to capture that vibe in my painting that I felt when I was there. And that can be kind of difficult, especially when your reference photos look kind of bland in comparison to your memories of it. Just trying to get the basic shapes drawn here. And I find when I'm using products like pastel sticks, like the Inktense blocks, which are they're a kind of water when they dry, they're very inky and waterproof. They're not as waterproof and inky as the Inktense pencils, I find, but I also find with the way I like to work, I tend to reach for the blocks and the pan paints more often than the pencils. And it's funny that that we all have our favorites, even though they could be products that do just about the same thing. Certain ways their packages are just gonna vibe better. They're gonna go with your style a little bit better. So at this point, I'm like, okay, I've got all this space around the scooter. The scooter wasn't as big on the paper as I intended to make it, but that gives me room for stamping and collage. And so I've got these little collage pieces that I pre-cut for my travel sketchbook, and I just kind of arranged them around, see what I liked, and then I thought I'm going to take some of my stamps like I did in the travel sketchbook prep video I did, and I'm going to do some stamping around the edges. And I've got both some of my stamps that I have through Craft World, and I have some of these Globeland ledger stamps that I picked up on Amazon. I think that you don't need both. You know, you can obviously dig through your stash, find something similar that you already have, but I love the size of those Globeland ones because it gives you a little variety. There's like receipts and ledgers and tickets and things like that. It gives you a little variety, and it goes really well with the ledger stamp that I have in my set with Craft World that has some other like script, and you can see my script there in the corner, and some other little doodads and, you know, bits and bobs that are really great for this collage style stamping that I like to do to prep pages. So the thing that my kind of feel when you're looking at supplies to add to your stash is that, first of all, you should like it, right? I don't want you going out and buying this stuff or buying similar things because you like the way I use it if you don't like the elements yourself. Because if you don't like it, if it's not your style, it's not going to match anything else you have. If you buy something because you're like, oh, I really like that, and it is going to work with other things I have, then it's going to be a good investment because you're going to be able to mix and match. If you go and buy something because it's trendy or because you saw somebody else use it and they made something cute, even though it's not your style, those are the things you're going to have a hard time working with because they're not going to jive. For me, I love vintage ephemera. I love tickets. I love ledger paper. I find stuff like that goes really well with the way I like to paint because I can work it into the background. Even though I tend to paint really colorful and really poppy sometimes, I find these vintage pieces really go well with my style. And the only way to develop your personal style is to paint and to draw and to create and to follow your gut. And sometimes you have to try out different techniques and different styles and different products to figure out what it is that's really you. But once you do and you start trusting your gut, and you just you have to kind of look at other people's work through your reality glasses, not your rose tinted glasses. And you can say, okay, I love that painting that so-and-so made, but that's not my style. That's not how I like to work. But you may say, oh, but I like that product. I like how she used it. Maybe I could use that product in my style. A lot of times with media products, you can, being like the Inktense blocks. But if you're like, oh, I don't like to get my fingers dirty, I don't like that mess, you're probably not going to like pastels, crayons, those types of items. But maybe you would prefer the pencil version or the pan paint version where you can keep your fingers clean. You know, you just need to know yourself so that you can make choices that are going to jive with your way of working. And like I said, if you want the real-time narrated lesson for this, it's 2 hours long. It's broken up into bite-sized chunks in Critique Club, along with over 150 other real-time lessons. I do a lot of mixed media in that group, and all of those tutorials are exclusive to Critique Club. There's no content from other classes in that group. It's all brand new stuff just for Critique Club. I post the time lapses on YouTube so people can kind of get an idea of what we're going to be doing. And I do find that my critique clubbers like to watch the time lapses on YouTube first, just so they've got an idea of the roadmap of what's going to happen. And sometimes people like to just put it on while they work on their own projects, and that's fine too. I think it can be useful to see these larger projects and to see the stumbling blocks and how to kind of figure your way out of mistakes. Like, I got so busy on this background that I had to bring my drawing back. So what I did was I grabbed a sepia Pentel pocket brush pen, and I just started sketching. And you could use black too, but I happened to use sepia because I thought it would look better with the vintage. But their sepia is really dark. It's almost as close to black. Actually, you know what? Maybe I did use black. Strike that, reverse it. I used black on that one. And if you want a cheap version of these Pentel pocket brush pens, if you buy the Japan import on Amazon, they're like $8, and it comes with 2 black cartridges, but you could put the gray cartridges or the sepia cartridges in them, and then you can get the sepia cartridges on Blick for like $3.50 for 2. But if you just buy the pen and a cartridge at Blick, it's like $13. So it's like you get a couple free black cartridges if you buy them on if you buy them on Amazon, then buy the refills for those colors on Blick. But you can get 12 refills of the black cartridges on Amazon for $8. So just wanted to give you that. I'll link that in the video description. You know, when I find a little hack like that that's going to save some money, the only downside is that your pen is not going to have the little gray or brown indicator on the top, so you'll need to make like a little swatch on a label sticker paper and stick it on there so that you know what color's in your pen. But other than that, I mean, it's the same exact stuff. So, I like to save a few bucks. I like to save a few bucks and have more options with my work. Now here I'm using some of my stencils from Craft World. This is a set of, there's 4 different designs on each stencil, and I have 2 stencils. One is more like damask and frou-frou. The other one is more grungy, and I used the more grungy one here because I thought that was going to work a little bit better. And they're very, I don't want to say generic, I want to say they're very versatile, so that you can use a little bit here, a little bit there, but I don't think you would get sick of the pattern because you can kind of repeat it. You can knock it back. Like I'm knocking it back here with some watercolor ground that I've tinted with a little acrylic paint. Honestly, I probably should have tinted it with watercolor because it may be a problem doing gouache over it. I didn't have a problem with it, but if you're really watering it down or you're using watercolor over that, you want to tint it with watercolor or gouache so that it won't repel any of the water. But I didn't have a problem here. I'm using my Studio Gouache palette. I have a whole video on how I set this up, but this palette is kind of special. The reason I set it up to be my Studio Gouache palette is because I used colors that were mostly single pigment. I think they might all be single pigment actually. And I used colors that were light fast so that I know if I grab this palette and I use it in a painting, all the colors in here are not going to fade. They're artist gouache versus designer gouache. Sometimes you can get designer gouache that are using art like non-fading pigments, but that's the difference. Artist gouache uses more of your light fast pigments. Designer gouache is primarily for it's going to prioritize getting certain colors, convenience colors, opacity, and a matte finish. You could even sometimes get a glossy finish with an artist's gouache. So it's a little bit finicky in that way, and they're not as opaque as designer gouaches, I find. Some will be, but not all. But so as long as you know that, it's kind of a compromise. If you want to get this certain quality, you might give up another certain quality. If you want the quality of light fastness, you may give up the quality of it being matte or being as opaque as the designer gouache. So FYI. I put Winsor & Newton blending medium in this palette so when the paints were wet and stirred up so that they will re-wet easier and they won't dry out rock hard. There is one of the browns is very crackly. It looks like kind of like desert cracked earth, but it re-wets really well, and that's another quality I wanted for this palette. I wanted to be able to spray it when I started and get right to painting. And I'm using a big Meeden ceramic palette for this, and I just really love the size of this palette, the size of the wells, the size of the mixing area. It's wonderful. I have a mixture of Holbein and M. Graham and Daniel Smith gouache. I think I have one Talon's color because I couldn't find Viridian, not like our true Viridian. I wanted a PG7, and that's the only place I could find a single pigment PG7. And I think I have a violet. It's a PV23. That the only way I could find it was in the Talon's gouache. And they all work well together. Please don't feel like you have to be brand loyal to any company to get the colors you want. And maybe those colors are available now in Daniel Smith, but at the time they weren't. And I do really like the Daniel Smith gouache. I'd say formulation wise and quality wise, my favorite gouache would be the Daniel Smith gouache, but it's very expensive. And at the time they didn't have all the colors I wanted because I didn't want the convenience mixes. I wanted the pure colors, but they have a mixing, like a starter mixing set that's really nice that I would recommend if you're curious about the line because it's a little bit cheaper than buying open stock tubes. For value, I think Da Vinci gouache is great for value, but you do get a shininess when you're using that mass tone and not mixing it down, but it pans really well. So for a travel palette, it's kind of aces, really. Like I said, you give a little, you get a little. If you're prioritizing a certain quality, you're probably going to have to give up some other qualities for it to get the way you want. But yeah, and I like Holbein gouache too. I feel like Holbein gouache is best fresh out of the tube because it does tend to want to crumble a bit, but the blending medium is going to help with that. And that is basically propylene glycol. It's not glycerin. It's a kind of like a related chemical to glycerin, but it is somewhat of a humectant. It's more of a drying inhibitor, I would say, but it works great. And Blick has the best price on that I found. And I just put I put quite a bit of it, honestly. I put a few drops per pan to slow the drying time and make it re-wettable a little easier. I don't want to use a glycerin in the gouache only because it makes it quite transparent, whereas the propylene glycol or the blending medium doesn't make it more transparent. So that's why I do that. Obviously do what you want to do. I often will use glycerin in watercolors that want to crack because I want them to remain transparent, but I don't want them to remain transparent in gouache. And there's a lot of me fussing around in this painting, I will tell you that. And I was really struggling with this, and there were many times in this painting I was about ready to give up. And I'm like, should I just start over? And the reason I pushed through was because at some point you get to this point where it's like, oh, everything is going wrong. Nothing's working. I'm so frustrated. I don't feel like I have enough contrast between my subject and the background. It's too busy. It's so frustrating. But at that point, what have you got to lose, right? I mean, I'm not saying punish yourself, but sometimes you've got to struggle in your painting. If everything goes right all the time, you're not pushing yourself, and you're going to get burnt out because you're going to get bored. And if I'm just looking for that quick win so I can post a video to YouTube, or I can post something in Critique Club, then I'm doing a disservice to you, and I'm doing a disservice to myself, because I'm not pushing myself and making myself see it through to see how I can fix it. Now, I have abandoned paintings in the past, but usually it's right off the bat. Like, I know I've made some grave error that just restarting would be so much better than trying to pull it. Like, I have a huge drawing error and I can't reclaim it. But at this point it's kind of like, okay, what have I got to lose? Can I make this some way fixable? And I thought, okay, this needs more going on. So I thought palm trees. Let's give it some palm trees. That's a big vibe in Key West, is beautiful palm trees. So I decided to put a few palm trees in the background. That will help knock back some of the collage elements. It'll help add to the setting, because I lost my parking space. I lost anything that was giving this any sort of setting of Key West, setting of the tropics. So putting the palm trees in is going to help build the setting and build the environment, and be a bit of a background. And then I'm like, okay, let's give it a shadow, and let's give everything a shadow. Let's unify our light. We already had a light source of the left side, which was making highlights on the left side of the scooter. So let's throw our shadows over to the right and help ground things, because everything's just floating around like a big sticker sneeze or a big collage sneeze in our background. So this is going to anchor. We need some anchoring, and we need some setting. And already I can see the palm trees made a big help. I came up with the idea of palm trees and maybe throwing in some chickens, because they're Key West. There's chickens running around everywhere wild in Key West. They must not have foxes there. That's all I can think. So I said, let's do some Key West chickens. Let's do some palm trees. And I think that will help it. Now, let me tell you, I wrote that on a note. I dropped it. I was so frustrated it was like Thursday afternoon. I was working on this. I was so frustrated. And I just took a little square note, and I just wrote Key West chickens and palm trees, and I just left it on the painting, and I walked away for 4 days. I had plans this weekend to go paint at the Botanical Gardens. I knew I wasn't going to be back in the studio, so I'm just like, I'm going to let that simmer for a bit, and we'll come back and we'll see what we think. And I like the idea of the chickens. Now, I took a few pictures of chickens while I was there, because I thought they were so cute. Looking back at my subpar photo, I am not a great photographer, I've got to say. So my photos are kind of like a memory jog. So that's why I love painting on location, because even though the on-location paintings might not be the best, when I come back to the studio and I work for my photos and I look at my paintings, and I'm going to remember what it was like to be there a lot more if I was painting there, because it forces you to look and notice rather than just kind of gloss over things. It hones your observation skills. So like, I was painting with my sister on Sunday, and she's not one who paints outdoors very much. And she's like, I'm not good at this. It's not working. I think I'm just going to wander around. It's like, the point isn't a good painting. You're not going to paint your best paintings on location, but you are going to paint fresh ones that are going to jog your memory when you get back. And I remember some of the colors on those roosters, those iridescent, gorgeous colors. Now, my acrylic paint pens are not super vibrant because they're opaque. So you give up the vibrancy to get the opacity, to get the ability for the ink to flow through the nib. It's going to be, and you want opacity, and you want ink to throw through a brush nib, you're going to have more pastel colors. But I'm like, that's all right. Pastel colors are so Key West that I can go with the pastel colors on the chickens, and I can kind of scrape back in with some darker blacks and work through that way. So I'm liking this now, especially looking back at it coming together in time lapse. The excruciating process of painting it in real time, though, was really not stressing me out, was really bumming me out. It's like, I want to be out, and it was a nice day, so it's like, I just want to be outside laying in the sun, or just kind of like painting in the sun, or just being outside instead of being in my basement studio painting this tropical painting that is not going well for me, and I'm super frustrated. And there was a quote by an artist, I think it was James Fitzgerald, who said, I don't look at my paintings, and I never like my paintings the first year or two after I've painted them. And somebody asked him, why is that? And he goes, because it takes me a year to forget the battle. I need to forget the struggle before I can enjoy the painting. And I completely understand that. And I'm paraphrasing the quote, but I get that. I get that, because when you're in it and you're just like, oh, how am I going to save this? Am I going to save this? Is all this work that I've done completely for naught and I have to start all over again? When you're in that, it can be so hard to shake it. You've got to kind of forget it. And then sometimes when you come back and look at it, you're like, oh, what was I so upset about? It's kind of like when you look at a picture of you when you're like 25 and you remember that day you hated your outfit and you were so mad somebody took a picture of you. And then you're like 45 looking at that and you're like, darn, I look good back then. But you can't see it because you're in it, right? You're in it, and you're being prejudiced by your current surroundings, by your current experiences. You can't look at it objectively. And when you look back at your paintings, at your sketchbooks, you can look at them objectively and see how they really look. So that's why I don't throw away a painting. That's why I have burnt paintings, so let's not say that. But that's why I don't give up on a painting. I'll push through it when I'm struggling, usually because I know I will learn something from it, even if I don't like the painting. If I'm going to fail, I want to fail fast, like in the first 10 minutes, because, you'll know if you have a big drawing error or some big error that you can't overcome, say in watercolor or whatnot. Just starting over would be easier. But when you're getting like an hour in, providing you haven't like pushed through a really fatal error in a painting, usually you've got a lot to learn during that process. And looking back at this at the video, I'm like, it's cute. It's cute. It's a cute painting. When I was doing it, however, I was like, oh man, I just wasted this day. I'm not gonna get this day back, because even though like I have 2 hours of footage of painting it, you've got the time where you're not recording, where you're just looking at it and you're hemming and hawing, you're thinking about it, and you're sifting through your reference photos and you're trying to find that perfect chicken, or and you're deciding and you're thinking, that takes a lot of time, all that emotional labor you're doing in the painting. But now I think it's kind of cute, and if you want to paint this along with me, get the real-time version, see the struggle in real time, you can check it out now in Critique Club. I'll have it linked down below in the video description. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, happy crafting.